Coronavirus has made us re-examine our relationship with animals. The virus originated in a species that was not our own, and it follows many others. Swine flu, bird flu, Ebola and Sars are all what are known as zoonotic diseases. That means they jump from animals to humans. Scientists hope to catch any potential new ones before they make that leap. So, what can we do to prevent another worldwide outbreak spreading from the animal kingdom to us? More than 11 million people worldwide have officially contracted the coronavirus so far. Almost 550,000 deaths are linked to COVID-19. And while we are still battling this pandemic and prepare for future ones, scientists believe it's wise to trace back the steps the virus has been taking.
Scientists believe the coronavirus outbreak in humans may well have begun in a market in the Chinese city of Wuhan. Researchers say leaps between species happen when humans and animals are in close proximity. One hypothesis is that the coronavirus jumped from bats to pangolins to people, in turn causing a global health emergency. Such leaps can happen in so-called wet markets. That's where viruses can easily change their host, crossing from one species to another. China is home to several wet markets, and the international community has been calling for their closure.
I think they should shut down those things right away.
We can clearly see the great risks to the health and well-being of the rest of the world.
It's currently thought there are over 200 diseases that have spread from animals to humans, known as zoonoses. About 40 have the potential to cause a pandemic. SARS, Ebola, AIDS, all are examples of viruses that jumped from animals to human beings. 3 out of 5 new infectious diseases that emerge originate from another species. One estimate puts deaths from diseases caused by zoonoses at 2.7 million a year, and that was in 2012. China is home to a major wildlife market industry, and many Chinese rely on it for their livelihoods. The question is whether the will is there for people to change some practices that put everyone's lives at risk.
Now, in China, researchers have discovered a new version of the swine flu. It belongs to the H1N1 virus type, which in 2009 kicked off a pandemic that killed more than 18,000 people. Scientists warn that the recently discovered version also has all the characteristics to pose a threat to humans.
This farm in Guangxi province in southern China is clean and well run. But it doesn't reflect the reality in many other parts of the country, where things look more like this. Poor hygiene and cramped conditions increase the risk of infection of all kinds, including swine flu. Now, against the backdrop of a global health emergency, scientists are warning of the danger of a group of swine flu viruses that have adapted to infect humans. The Chinese government has criticized the study in question. Experts have concluded that the sample size of the report is small and not representative. Relevant departments and experts will continue to strengthen monitoring, send early warnings and handle things in a timely manner. After the devastation caused by COVID-19, it's in China's interest to take the threat seriously. After all, the country does not want to become the epicenter of another pandemic.
It's something that still is in the stage of examination. It's not so-called an immediate threat where you're seeing infections, but it's something we need to keep our eye out on, just the way we did in 2009 with the emergence of the swine flu.
So far, there's been no evidence of person-to-person transmission of the new strain of swine flu virus. But the last few months have shown just how fast that could change.
A short while ago, I spoke to Wen-King Zhang. She manages the global influenza program at the World Health Organization. And I asked her how worried she was about this so-called G4 strain of the swine flu.
So the G4 strain of swine influenza virus is not new virus. This virus comes from a surveillance program from 2011 and 2018. There were human infections of this G4 group swine virus reported. So of course, we are concerned of this virus as well as other swine viruses and avian influenza viruses. But otherwise, it reminds us that we should remain the vigilance and be aware of the threat from influenza.
Does it have the potential to cause a similar pandemic as the coronavirus now?
Well, it's very difficult to say, but all the animal influenza viruses, the swine viruses, have the potential. We only don't know which virus will jump out and cause the next influenza pandemic.
How do these viruses transmit? Give us an idea.
Well, this swine virus is a zoonotic influenza virus, which means that it could infect humans sporadically. Just recently, there was a human infection of swine viruses reported from Germany. Well, this is a swine virus infection in a child who had the direct contact with pigs. So this type of zoonotic infection occurs from time to time. But until this virus develops efficient human-to-human transmission, it has a threat there, but certainly it's not a pandemic that it is causing.
Wen King, 3 out of 5 new infectious diseases that emerge originate from animals. Where do you see the biggest risk for the transmission of pathogens from animals to humans?
Yeah, of course. Well, animal is a vast reservoir of many viruses. Those viruses circulating in animals, and most of those are silently in animals, which means animals don't present any diseases. But if one of those viruses jump through the species barrier, infecting human, and also causing efficient human-to-human transmission, then it will be problematic. So we really need to look into the human-animal interface, to be alert, at the earliest stage, as possible, any viruses that jumping out from animal species to human, so that we could pick those up. And of course, a lot of efforts being done under the One Health umbrella.
When we talk about the animal-human interface, what sort of role do wet markets play when it comes to the transmission of these viruses?
Well, human-animal interface, of course, there are a lot of fronts. Certainly, markets, wet market is one of those, but also there are other of agricultural mode. Well, for example, the backyard, the backyard poultry, as well. So I think what we've been doing is with FAO and OIE to improve overall with regards the practice at human-animal interface in the agriculture sectors, etc. So I think there's a lot of efforts need to be done in parallel with regards to the wet market, backyard, as well as those commercial farming, etc.
And now it's time for our resident coronavirus expert. Here's our science correspondent, Derek Williams, answering your questions about COVID-19.
Do people who are asymptomatic carry the same amount of virus as people who show symptoms?
Spread from asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic patients is one reason COVID-19 has moved with such lightning speed through our populations. Live, viable SARS-CoV-2 is clearly being shed by people who often show no symptoms of the disease when they test positive for it. So we know they're playing a role in transmission, much more of a role than they did, for example, during the SARS epidemic, when patients were most infectious 5 to 10 days after they began showing symptoms. The European Centers for Disease Control say it's difficult to quantify how contagious asymptomatic people are because studies simply don't agree. But the general consensus appears to be that they're less contagious than patients with symptoms or pre-symptomatic patients, people who are going to get sick but just don't know it yet. However, there's also growing evidence that there are no significant differences in viral loads between the groups. So to sum it up, asymptomatic people appear to carry just as much of the virus as someone with symptoms, but they seem to be at least a little less likely to spread it.
What does the data say about the effects of COVID-19 on diabetics?
Having diabetes is unquestionably a risk factor for developing more severe forms of COVID-19. It's the second most common comorbidity in intensive care patients after chronic heart disease. And having diabetes is also associated with higher rates of mortality. Some researchers looking at why have speculated that by inducing a massive immune response, SARS-CoV-2 causes the body to destroy cells in the pancreas or liver that are involved in keeping blood sugar levels balanced. Others think the virus can attack and kill those cells directly. One way or the other, experts say that in addition to the dangers that COVID-19 poses to someone who has diabetes, it can also make the autoimmune disease worse. Some even think the virus can trigger, in some cases, diabetes in people who didn't have it before they were infected. But it'll take larger scale and longer term studies to prove or disprove that theory.